Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And I receive this question in one form or another consistently enough that I think I should address dating abroad. How does it work? What's it like? What are the expectations? All that jazz. Actually, when I opened this paper up earlier to check my notes for the podcast, it just said rad, and I hadn't filled out anything else about dating while you're traveling, and I thought that was really funny. So it just said, dating abroad? Rad. Because it is. It's great. That's what it's like. It's great. How does it work? Same way normal dating works. You find someone you're interested in, you ask if they want to spend time doing what you want to do, and if they're into it, great. And if they're not, find someone else. What are the expectations? Totally depends on the two of you. I recommend making things clear, how long you're going to be where you are, what you're looking for, and then the expectations will be known. Dating while traveling, I enjoy much more than dating while sedentary. It's almost easier while you're traveling to know what you want because very often you're there for 2 months or 6 months or whatever. You know how long you have, and so you don't have to be as afraid as many people are. We're normally very cautious. Humans are conservative in general, with good survivalist reasons. What I find interesting is that it seems like as the traveler, you gain some sort of pre-approval to determine the expectations up front. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It sort of seems like if you have enough of a direction that you want to travel, that's already more than many sedentary people know about what they want to do. In their lives, I mean. Like, many people stay in a job or in a relationship or in a house or in any kind of living situation, any part of their life, because they're already doing it. Because it's easy to stay in what they know. They know they can survive it because they are surviving it, so they can survive more of it. They don't have to do something new. And as I've mentioned, traveling is simple to do. You get your travel documents, you buy the ticket, you go. It might not be super easy, but it is very simple. But that direct action seems to confer upon a person an aura of knowing. Having a literal direction in which you're traveling implies a sense of direction within your whole sense of self. And I think that's fair, because spending a week in Italy for the first time, you're going to learn more in that first week in Italy than you are, or rather I should say, than I did, working an entire year in my job at the bakery. And it means that the traveler is taking control of their life in some measure. They're not staying in a relationship because they're in a relationship. They're not staying at a job because they're already at the job. They are doing this thing because they want to do it. And that's a fair assessment. Most travelers I know are traveling because they want to travel. That is an active decision, which is very different from a lot of sedentary lifestyles. And it's awesome if you love your job. It's great if you want to stay and maintain the relationships of your friends and family you've cultivated for a lifetime. That makes perfect sense and is a perfectly valid way to live your life. This is just the impression that I get from how people talk to me and other travelers in general. Like we figured out some sort of direction. Which I would say, even if you haven't figured out a direction, once you're traveling, everything is much more clear than when you're inside the fog of a well-accumulated culture and life. So while I'm abroad, it does seem easier for me to date, and I get the same feedback from other travelers. Not my partners, but other people, other travelers who date. It seems easier to do while you're already moving in a direction, while you're already making the decision to travel. You're already questing for something by traveling, and love is such an innate human component. And other people notice that too. Which brings us into the next point. Because you are traveling and you have an apparent purpose, even if that purpose is be here for a couple weeks, you are interesting, you're novel. If the same person saw you sitting down next to them in a coffee shop, they might not speak to you for 3 hours and then leave for years. Even if you were in the coffee shop at the same time for years, that might just never happen. But if someone knows you're a traveler, instantly, they're much more likely to ask you, where are you from? Which country were you in before? Where are you going next? Why do you travel? What do you get out of it? Do you ever get lonely? And you get to answer these basic questions, break the ice, and then you get to answer personal questions. So within 10 minutes, the person that you're talking to, you both have a sense of, oh, this person is asking very insightful questions that resonate with what I care about. So you know if you like them or not. And then because you're sharing with them your values, they know pretty quickly if they like you too. By being a traveler, it's very easy to break the ice and get to know the other person within a very short conversation, with many more people in general than you would, say, the people around your neighborhood. It might be easy to say hey or cool dog to someone for years living near them and never know anything about the person. But most people that you talk to while you're traveling will ask you something personal. Because, just like I said, it'll lead from the couple basic questions that many people ask into something that has to be personal, although it might seem fundamental. Why are you traveling? What made you live in Korea for 2 years? You're going to be sharing values and beliefs and insights and conclusions that you've come to. It's really interesting how quickly you can get to know someone, or really, that's not true, but how quickly you can judge whether the two of you would make good friends or partners or whatever you want to call it, sexy times together, just by talking to someone. And because they're already asking you what it becomes apparent is personal as soon as you reveal your values and why you travel, for instance, it's easier to be direct. They can tell you if they're into it or not because you've already shared something deeper. If they just have to let you know that they have a husband or a girlfriend already and they're not interested in polyamory, then okay, now you know. But you can still have a good conversation. I find it much easier to get to know someone while I'm traveling. It's a lot like when you're younger and you start drinking and all of a sudden you're having these super deep, insightful conversations and they last for 4 hours with someone you've never met. You just met them at the party, or it's the first time you talk to them after work. And because you're both drinking, your inhibitions are lowered and you're just letting your true colors fly. And then the next morning, maybe it was a good conversation, but you probably forgot like half of it, and you probably weren't making super good points anyway because you're drunk. Being traveling gives you that in right away to have meaningful conversations, but you can remember all of it the next time you see that person and build off of that. Another reason dating while you're traveling is great is because people in general, globally, worldwide, as far as I've been, are much kinder and more helpful to travelers than your next door neighbor. If your water pipe bursts and you have to ask your next door neighbor for help, you probably don't really want to ask them, and they're like, I was just pulling the cookies out of the oven and now I have to help this person. There's some sort of thing where knowing someone, familiarity breeds contempt. I'll put it this way because this is much easier to crystallize. I can probably count on one hand the number of times in my life that I've been living a sedentary life and asked a neighbor for help and got help. Versus traveling, I could not recall the amount of times I have asked for help and instantly received it, or the number of times I have received incredibly generous help without even asking for it. And people have been helpful in what are considered the most dangerous neighborhoods in the entire country. People have been helpful in stores when they see me buying something. Every single I literally can't count either of those situations in which people have offered help to me as a traveler. People in general are more kinder and more helpful towards travelers. I personally, and every traveler that I've been in a conversation about this specific topic with, received kinder and more helpful treatment from people while traveling. And not even when I'm in need of help. People call me over for tea or to share a conversation and a meal with them, or just to talk. Lean over and let me know how much I should buy that bicycle pump for from the local seller. Or to play a game. Like, people just want to get to know a traveler more than they want to know their neighbors. They're much more interested in talking to the guy with the rucksack on his back than they are to the person who's lived next door to them for 14 years. That is just how people work as far as I've seen them, at least in relation to me, and as far as I understand, at least in relation to other travelers. It's a general agreement that while you're traveling, people are going to be more helpful and kind. And interested. So when a girl in Iga Castle, where I was laying in my hammock, asked me if I was all right because I was lying in a hammock in the middle of a day in a ninja courtyard, I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'm good. How are you? And I went on a date with that girl later on. There was a girl whose suitcase was broken in Chiang Mai, and I thought about it, and then I felt like a genius because I actually came up with this, but I had an extra keyring in my bag. I put the keyring through the zipper hole because it was just the other part that had broken off, the little handle part, and it worked perfectly to the zipper, and she shared her contact information with me, and we talked off and on for years after that. And I think she was offering to let me kiss her in thanks, and then I didn't get it because I'm an idiot. I will say real quick, there is the general allure of a traveler too. Ooh, it's a man or woman of mystery. Where are they going? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? There is, you have an air of mystery around you now. All you had to do is buy a plane ticket, and now people think you're internationally interesting. It's a great shortcut to a personality. I'm kidding, because I don't think that's true. That is a joke. But I do think it's a very good shortcut to people giving you the benefit of a doubt and immediately trying to find out who you are and what you're all about. You don't have to play the social games because you're outside of your culture. So if you misspeak, you didn't just misspeak about 27 cultural connotations that you have to get correct every time you say anything. You can clarify your message, the person can ask a follow-up question, you have real conversations, and inevitably, in every situation, once people start having real conversations, they find out that, oh, that thing I thought they said that made it sound that they were so far away from my position on that topic, we're actually pretty much the same, and we just disagree on one or no details sometimes. If you are not assumed to be speaking under an obligatory cultural context, then people pay attention to what you are actually saying. Whereas if you said the same sentence under the burden of obligatory cultural connotations, in which you're supposed to believe words only have one meaning because that's where the culture is at that point, then it's much easier for the listener to jump to a conclusion and make a decision about who you are and what your values are, simply because of the words you used and the assumption that if you are both from a country, then you must have been using that cultural context when you said that word rather than the actual definition of the word. When it often is not, when miscommunication is so common all the time in every situation. If you're traveling and outside of your culture, you don't have to deal with that as much. As a traveler, people literally take you at your word. They say, okay, that's the word they meant to use, but maybe I'm understanding it wrong because our two cultures are different. So they'll say, oh, did you mean? They're going to try to meet you halfway instead of just assuming what you meant, which is very common when you share a culture. Whoever you're talking to will be like, okay, this is what they mean. The problem there is the assumption that you share a culture, even if you are from the same country and it is a monoculture, like China or like Japan or like many countries, that person grew up a different life than you. Their home life might be different. Their work life is different. Their health might be different. So when they use the word corny, maybe they don't mean goofy. Maybe they just mean funny when they use the word corny. But you think they mean goofy because you're from the same culture, so you assume if you think it means goofy, then they think corny means goofy, and they're being insulting. They're not. They meant funny. Or something else, but you have to ask them to find out, rather than just assuming that they only understand words in the same way that you do, regardless of one cultural tie that you two share. This open conversation while you're traveling, this open feeling of mutual understanding and tolerance really helps develop personal relationships much easier. What else is great about dating while you're traveling? That you're surrounded by date locations. A lot of people don't do anything where they live. A lot of people who've been to New York don't see the Statue of Liberty. Tons of people in China have not been to the Great Wall, like most of the country, I would guess, even though lots of people go. I've gone with Chinese people more times for their first time than I've gone with people who have been there before. People don't go to the attractions near them, and with you being a traveler, you have a great excuse. You're like, well, hey, I'm only here for a month. Do you want to meet up at the Modern Art Museum? And yeah, I haven't been to that museum in years. Or, sure, I've never tried it before. Or Angkor Wat. Like, imagine you meet someone in a suburb of Memphis, and there's nothing around, and you can't think of anything. You're like, oh, I guess we could drive for an hour to the city, and there's this cool I like to go to, or like, there's a show coming up in 2 weeks, we can go to this show. Do you like industrial punk? Or versus you meet someone when you're traveling in Cambodia. Let's go to Angkor Wat. Yeah. They'll want to go to a wonder of the world with you. It's an intricately carved 1,000-year-old stone palace, preserved, surrounded by live elephants and food kiosks. The date locations are literal wonders of the world often. Or you know what happened all the time in Thailand when I would decide to go on a date with someone? Oh, let's go to the 7-step waterfall. Can't do that in Denver, but you can sure do that in literally everywhere in Thailand. There are step waterfalls everywhere. Oh, well, what do you want to do? Oh, we can go walk around the night market where there's 300 people selling delicacies for $0.25 each, and I can just buy you 100 treats. Or we can go snorkeling in the private lagoon that's world renowned for snorkeling. It's really that much of a difference, certainly for me. Wherever I lived in the States, I was the same. I was living there, so I was like, whatever, yeah, it's a cool mountain, I guess. No, I don't really want to climb Mount Hood. But if I was visiting Washington State on a trip, let's go to Mount Hood, which is a cool mountain. While you're traveling, everything is always interesting to you because you haven't seen it before. They probably haven't been there before or haven't been to it in years, and they want to spend time with you. And a lot of these naturally beautiful locations are inherently romantic or tranquil or peaceful. It's just great that there are so many date locations while you're traveling. Nobody's going to mind going to a tourist spot because you are a tourist. You're a traveler. And tourist spots are touristy for a reason. They usually are cool. I didn't go to the Statue of Liberty when I was in New York because there was a line, but I took the ferry like 20 times and just watched it and was like, yep, that's cool. But I lived there for months, never even felt the urge to go to the Statue of Liberty Island itself. But if I met a traveler, some cute girl with a rucksack and curly hair who asked me, I really want to see the Statue of Liberty. Will you go with me? Yeah, let's go now. Let's go right now. I'll take you to the Statue of Liberty. I see it every day. It's crazy I haven't gone. I'm so glad you want to go. Let's go. It's funny I'm using that example because I'm really uninterested in actually going inside, despite all the stories I've heard about how great it is. I don't know. Maybe it's because I lived there for too long and I was like, whatever. It's just one of those 1,500-foot statues or whatever that some countries give other ones in celebration of independence. No, it's probably more that you have such a great view of it on the Staten Island Ferry. It looks really cool. You're pretty close. It's really big, so you can see it pretty well anyway while you're on the ferry. For free. The ferry is also free. So I got my fill. I love going by it every time, but I don't have the itch to go to the island itself. Okay, so dating is great because you start meaningful conversations. You're novel and mysterious as a traveler. People in general are kinder and more helpful while you're traveling. There's all these cool date locations. And there are still more reasons why it's much more accessible to start dating while traveling. For me, and for many people I know. Staying in hostels, great way to meet people. You're sleeping next to a person 4 days. You're going to say something to them, as opposed to going to work with someone that maybe you're interested in, but you can't find a way to start any kind of conversation with them for 4 years. Easily happens constantly to everybody. But if you both wake up in the hostel and a dog shit in the entryway, you're both going to be like, well, that's fucking gross. And then one of you is going to have some gross story that happened to you somewhere where you were traveling, and you'll start talking, and boom, you're friends. So just being in the same place with people, it's like going to elementary school all over again, getting seated at tables with each other. You usually become friends with that person because you were sitting next to them. It's very easy to meet people and start up conversations and relationships, platonic or romantic, because of the close proximity and the shared experiences of living in a place, traveling in a place, doing the same thing, basically together. Or meetups. You know what? A lot of first-time travelers get kind of nervous and they want to touch roots, kind of. So a lot of expats or travelers have meetups in every city in the world, and you'll just have 20 or 30 different travelers just meet up. Everybody has a drink, they talk for a bit, and then they leave again. But everyone's just looking for simple connection. So while you're traveling, and locals will be there too, people will be looking for connection explicitly, and you'll be there. So if you're looking for a connection, that's a good spot to look for a connection with a whole bunch of other people who are looking to connect with you and other people. Which leads right into the next reason it's easier to date. Travelers are all more open and more interested in hearing each other's stories than any neighbor is in hearing your story of the barbecue yesterday. No matter how interesting the barbecue story is, a traveler will listen to another traveler talk about floating down a river, not doing anything for like an hour without a problem. Like, it's pretty easy to listen to adventure stories, basically, than it is to listen to an experience that you can directly connect with. Like, yeah, I also poured too much lighter fluid into my machine one time and it made fire. After you travel and go back home, if you visit home again, I've heard this so many times from travelers, and I've experienced it myself, and I've done it. I did this to my girlfriend at the time when she visited France. She came back from a long trip, a month in France, and we were dating pretty seriously at the time, and she had interesting stories that she wanted to tell me, but I was definitely stuck in the American grind of customer service and was just exhausted all the time. I didn't understand why she wanted to talk about adventures because I was sedentary. So when she told me about it, I just said, wow, France? Cool. Oh, you drank wine? Cool. Okay. So, what do you want to do today? Are you opening or am I opening on Wednesday? And I was just Like, shut that information down. She was still living in this wider world, and I was dragging her back into the static world that I was familiar with. And she explained that feeling to me a little later on. But if you're traveling and you talk to someone else in a hostel, or a local especially, if you tell them, yeah, I was just in Toulouse and I had a baguette, and they were like, a baguette, like the big bread thing? You're talking about bread, they are interested. And if you can't tell from this podcast, a lot of travelers love to not shut up about our stories. And that's mutual. Once you start telling a story, the other person wants to match a reciprocal story. And if you're both travelers, you probably have pretty good stories. And if one of you is a traveler and the other one's a local, they still have good stories because everybody has stories. Some people just don't talk about them normally. But, point one, way up above, was that people are more interested in speaking directly and finding out the values and personal interests of travelers, so they're more likely to share stuff they wouldn't share with other locals and other people they talk to casually every day for years. Everybody wants to share their stories with travelers, likely because there's an undercurrent of, well, a traveler knows what an adventure is, they understand what a story is, they'll get my story too. And then even if the story is crappy, you've just had a full conversation with someone. And like I said again before, if you've had a full conversation with someone, it doesn't really matter how good the story was, you're inevitably going to get a little bit closer by sharing a personal conversation with another person. That's how it works. You're not going to meet a lot of bigots who go to meetups with people and cultures they're unfamiliar with. That's not how it works. When you talk to someone personally, you understand them better, and if you understand someone, you're not as afraid of them, and if you're not afraid of them, then you don't dislike them. I've seen it 1 billion times, I've experienced it 100 billion times. It's just how it works with other humans. Inevitably, you're like, oh, they're also a person. I thought they were a different alien species, but turns out they're basically just a human being, like me. And once two people accept that they're both just human beings, it's very easy to fall into like and lust and love. If you're back home and you see your neighbor again that you haven't seen in a couple of years and, oh yeah, I was teaching English abroad, it was really cool, they'll be like looking around, like you'll see their eyes darting around trying to get out of the conversation. They'll be like, yeah, that's cool. They like had chopsticks or whatever? Yep, they all ate with chopsticks. But I loved this little section of the city called Wu Dao Ying. Like it had all this live music. It was really cool. Like there were punk bands and locals and like teachers from other countries were playing together. And they're just like sweating, looking around like, oh my God, are they ever going to stop talking? I have to get back to my dog. My dog's been waiting inside for like a minute. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about people that don't travel that the routines of their lives have a much stronger hold on their interest than anything without, as in outside of those routines. At least in the States, I would guess it's like the desperate struggle to survive in such an expensive and socially demanding culture. Like, you develop a routine so that you have a basis of comfort from which you can deal with political concerns or social concerns or any events that rise up. But that's why people develop those routines, a sort of an insulative bubble around them, so they can deal with their anxiety of interacting with the rest of the world, is how I see it. When you're traveling, you just have to accept that the world is there, and you should go toward the things that are interesting and go away from the things that are not interesting or hurtful. Talking about traveling to Americans very much sounds like you're describing Narnia a lot of the time. And I mentioned this before, but America's only connected to 2 countries, which is a very rare situation for a country. Most countries are connected to more than 2 countries. And Americans just hear, you should travel. You should travel. And they're like, that's insane. Why would I leave? I've never even seen another country. That's crazy. If you're in anywhere in Europe, of course, you're connected to a whole bunch of other countries. And, even if you're in China, you know that the borders of your country are connected to a bunch of other countries. America has 2, and they just assumed that the ones to the north are basically them, but they forgot to add some stripes to their flag. And then the ones at the bottom eat tacos, but America has tacos anyway, so why worry about traveling over there? I get it. That's taco country. And that is shared by most people who grow up in most countries, because countries have a culture and it's difficult to leave the culture. And it's difficult to see how small and confining any culture is until you're outside of that culture. And as soon as I'm back inside it, I instantly pick up all of the ropes and burdens again and immediately begin responding to social cues that I would have laughed at a week ago with 1,000 miles of perspective. I probably do that less now than I did before, but it's still inherent to conform to the society around you, especially if you grew up with it. All that is to say that when you're traveling, if you have something genuinely interesting to say, yeah, I actually worked as an auto mechanic in Madrid for a couple months because I ran out of money. Any other traveler is going to be like, okay, tell me the whole story, way slower, in detail. They'll want to hear the whole story because it's probably an interesting story on its face, and it probably tells them something about you. And traveling very rapidly becomes a way to understand yourself and the world around you better. And you telling this story to them is going to help them understand the world a little bit better. Help them meditate on another small piece of the pattern in the fabric of reality. And because other travelers will listen, it's very easy to find a connection, short-term and long-term. Literally a day or marriage. Dating apps are also bigger than ever. They're basically what dating is now, as far as I understand. Traveling is the only way I can see meeting someone organically with any regularity or fluidity. But every country has some form of Tinder or some dating app, and if you use those, you'll be able to find someone. But online, and more interestingly, offline, as I mentioned many times above, dating is very accessible and very frequent for travelers, for all the travelers I know. You're a more interesting person when you're traveling, and you are probably becoming more interested in the world around you and are interested in the stories and personalities of the people surrounding you. And if you're interested in listening to someone else, that person will like you more. And if they like you enough, they'll want to grow that connection. And that's like full circle why, when I decided to talk about this, I didn't have a big bunch of notes right away, because every time I thought about talking about dating while traveling, I just was like, it's really cool. It's very personal. It's a wonderful, it's good. So I just wrote rad in my notes, and that just sat there for weeks until I finally fleshed something out a little more. Oh, and in the interest of inclusivity, because I know I keep mentioning polar opposite genders, whatever, that absolutely goes for gender fluid or gay or however you identify. I've known everybody and every gender preference. They are dating someone. They have dated someone. So it's not just a boy and a girl. It's boys and girls and girls and girls and cat girls. It's all over the map. It's the traveling thing that makes it easier to date, just like traveling makes so many other things fall into focus. Thank you for listening. I am glad I talked about this. I will talk to you on the next one. I hope everything's going good.